You know, when you think of a census today, what comes to mind? Filling out forms, right? Data, politics. But what if a census came with a deadly warning? What if the simple act of counting people was so risky it required a ransom for your actual life? Yeah, let's get into this ancient paradox.
It's a huge paradox, right? I mean, on one hand, counting your people is just practical. It's something any nation needs to do. But on the other hand, these ancient texts are telling us it could bring down a devastating plague from God. So what gives? Why was this seemingly simple administrative task loaded with so much danger?
Well, the answer, or at least the core of it, is right here in this passage from the book of Exodus. It's a direct command to Moses, and it says, "When you take the census, each shall give a ransom for his life to the Lord." And the reason is spelled out, plain and simple, that there be no plague among them. So this isn't some polite suggestion. It's presented as an absolutely critical, life-saving measure.
Okay, so to really get why this ransom was so important, we have to first dig into the risk. What was it about a simple head count that was seen as so spiritually dangerous?
And this is where you see this huge clash in perspective. You know, from our human point of view, a census is just a tool. It's practical. You're measuring your military strength, your national resources, basically you're measuring how strong you are. But from the divine perspective, that's the whole problem right there. Counting your people could so easily slide into an act of human pride, a way of puffing out your chest and saying, "Look how great we are."
Yeah, and that kind of thinking, that focus on human strength, leads to some really serious spiritual pitfalls. The act of counting could make the nation forget where their real security came from. It wasn't about the size of their army. It was about God's protection. It's a really subtle but dangerous shift from faith to spreadsheets, basically. And this reliance on numbers, this lack of trust, was seen as basically rolling out the welcome mat for God's anger.
So, okay, if the act itself is packed with all this spiritual danger, how in the world are you supposed to do it safely? Well, the text gives a very, very specific answer. You need a ransom.
This ransom for life, or odkup za život, was just steeped in symbolism. This payment, it was this powerful, tangible reminder for every single person. It said, my life isn't just a number to be tallied for a king's army. My life belongs to God. It was this incredible, collective act of humility, designed to push back against the pride that came with the census.
And listen, this wasn't just some nice symbolic thing. The ransom had a very real, very immediate purpose: to stop that deadly plague from wiping people out. It was a spiritual shield against a very real, physical disaster.
And it couldn't just be any old payment. No, the amount, what it was made of, the meaning behind it, all of it was super specific. This was the price of atonement.
And here it is. The price was exactly 1/2 of a silver shekel per person. Not gold, not a percentage of your wealth, just this small, very specific amount. And that uniformity, that's the whole key. It points to something much, much deeper.
You see, this half shekel was way more than just currency. It was an act of reconciliation, of making things right with God before you even finished the potentially prideful act of counting. It was a real physical way of saying life is a sacred gift, not a statistic. And when everyone did it together, it was the whole nation saying, we belong to God.
Okay, now we get to what is, for my money, the most radical and socially groundbreaking part of this whole command. The price was exactly the same for everybody.
Now you have to remember, this is a world built on strict social hierarchies. Your wealth determined your value in pretty much everything. And this law comes in and says, nope, the rich, you are forbidden from giving more.
And just as important, the poor weren't allowed to give any less. There was no discount for them. Their life wasn't considered less valuable. They had to pay the exact same amount.
I mean, the message here is just crystal clear. When it comes to the ultimate value of a human life, the price of atonement, everybody is on a level playing field. The life of the wealthiest landowner and the life of the poorest shepherd were worth the exact same. That's an incredible statement on universal human worth, especially for its time.
So, what happened to all this silver? Did it go into the king's treasury? Nope. It was dedicated to the service of the sanctuary, the spiritual heart of the community. So in a very real way, that ransom money became a permanent physical memorial, constantly reminding the people of their atonement and their fundamental equality before God.
So the big question is, what happens if you just ignore this rule? Well, the Bible gives us a pretty unforgettable cautionary tale that shows you exactly what happens.
Right, the story of King David. It's the perfect case study. He's feeling pretty good about himself after all his military wins, and his pride gets the better of him. He decides he's going to count his fighting men. He wants to see the numbers, to quantify his own strength. He completely blows off the warnings from his advisors, and, this is the crucial part, he does the census without the half-shekel ransom. And the result? You guessed it, a devastating plague, exactly what the law in Exodus warned about, rips through the land.
David's story really just hammers the whole point home, doesn't it? The problem wasn't the counting itself. It was why he was doing it. It was an act of pride, not obedience. It showed a deep lack of faith, trusting in the size of his army instead of the God who gave him all those victories to begin with.
And that really brings us all the way back to today. I mean, we live in an age that is absolutely obsessed with data, with metrics, with analytics. We try to quantify everything. But this ancient story leaves us with a really provocative question, I think. What do we risk when we try to measure that which is sacred? When we reduce people to data points or success to just numbers on a screen? Are we, in our own modern way, forgetting the unquantifiable value of life, of faith, of humanity itself? It's definitely something to think about.